All right, so here's a quick glimpse of the agenda for today and what we'll be talking about primarily. So we'll have a quick refresher on CLMs, workflows and automation. So I'm sure everyone present in this room already has some familiarity experience with CLMs, workflows and automations. We'll do a refresher and then we'll dive on to how we leverage these for further enhancements. We talk about certain integrations specifically to ITSM solutions. ServiceNow being a big player in ITSM part, we talk about Keyfactor and ServiceNow ITSM integrations and how we leverage that. We talk about specific custom workflows that are different from the out-of-the-box workflows that we have in Keyfactor Command, how we can leverage other functionalities that exist within Keyfactor Command and help utilize these in workflows to meet customer objectives and their requirements. We'll also be having a look at the technical aspects of each of these workflows that we'll be talking about. So a little technical deep dive into each of these workflows. And then last but not the least, we'll talk about a few benefits of using certain automation alongside workflows and leave some time towards the end for Q&A. So what is our approach, Dotsquares? What is the game plan when we talk about customer requirements, when we talk about workflows and automation? When we onboard a customer on a CLM, a Keyfactor Command, once the initial bits are squeezed out, so we have their CA synchronizing, you have the orchestrators, you have the certificate stores integrated, you're doing inventory jobs, you're pulling in information from various sources, kind of giving them a quick overview of what their PKI looks like inside a CLM. But apart from that, there are requirements that come in when a customer wants to enhance their automation and enhance their workflows to streamline the process, be more efficient around it, and at the end of the day, minimize the manual overhead required with PKI, maintenance of PKI. Adding automation and workflows into this specifically helps. The first bit that we usually do is understanding the customer needs, understand what they need. If we already have a pre-built solution, we'll go ahead and use that. If not, then we start looking at customizing the workflows within the built-in functionalities using API integrations and then how to achieve the requirements. Of course, there is a continuous improvement picture as well. So we want to ensure that the workflows that we build are future-proof. Customers upgrading do not, the workflows do not break in a nutshell. All right, so there are certain manual processes that are involved in CLMs. So maybe if we talk about certificate issuance, maybe we talk about metadatas being added to certificates, maybe we talk about certificate stores. There are certain manual elements that can be automated. These can be automated through existing workflows, and then if there are specific requirements, we could probably automate them further using customized codes, either using PowerShell, API scripting, so on and so forth. We also have a look at the importance of metadata. So metadata is pretty important in terms of tagging those certificates and ensuring that these certificates reside in the right collections, so they are tracked during the renewals, and whether you want to continue with that certificate or you want to gracefully retire that certificate in the moving time. Keyfactor and ServiceNow integration. This is something that we come across very often. So a lot of customers we work with, they have ITSM solutions already in place. They kind of leverage some sort of workflows on ITSM. So they're tracking some information related to certificates in ServiceNow. They're tracking some information in Keyfactor Command. Now to bridge the gap, we kind of do integrations there, so we can pull in information from ServiceNow where it's required. We could also push information to ServiceNow if required. So it's a very essential piece of integration that helps customer achieve a lot of resilience in how their workflows and certificates are managed. All right. I will hand it over to Sushil to quickly run through the next few slides.
Thank you, Zubin. All right. Thank you. So first we'll talk about what custom workflows are basically. So we've all heard about them, and we know how powerful they can be. So with Keyfactor Command specifically, we provide custom workflow solutions, and it helps automate certificates' entire lifecycle process, right? And it also makes sure that the integration is seamless with enterprise systems while also enforcing security policies. So in the coming slides, we'll be taking a look at a couple of specific workflows which we've identified. Yes. So when we talk about a certificate, right, so there are three basic points in a certificate's life which are very crucial. One is when the certificate is born, we can say. That's kind of like certificate when it was issued. Second is when the certificate is living its life throughout. So you plan on how you're going to be tackling that certificate, how you're going to be tracking it, and is the certificate going to be renewed, or are you going to let the certificate expire gracefully? So there are certain points in the certificate's life that we need to track, and as a PKI admin, it's very important that we keep a tab on all of certificates which are issued. Now in this particular presentation, we're going to be targeting the two. One is when the certificate is issued, and the second when the certificate is renewed. All right. Thank you. So this is going to be for metadata. Now, when the certificate is issued initially, we have to make sure that the certificate is easily identifiable in a sea of certificates, millions of certificates, which would be similar unless and until there is something unique that is tied to each certificate, and we call it metadata. Now, what we've observed is a lot of our customers, what they tend to do is after the issuance of the certificates, they just create metadata fields and they manually add the entries to the metadata, which is a good thing because that also differentiates the certificate and it's easily identifiable. But what it also adds is a human error factor, which means when the certificate is reaching its end of life cycle and you add certain automation to that, it is possible that there is some mistake with the metadata and it may fall out of the workflow, which will in turn cause the certificate to expire and alerting not be sent out to the correct group of people who should get the certificate alerts. Now, in this particular workflow, metadata workflow, the goal is to automate metadata updates based on the ServiceNow API response that we get. Now, what we're going to be trying to do is take the job out of the user's hand of updating the metadata manually and rather let the API do the job for them so that there's zero error and the metadata which will be tied to the certificate after issuance, it will be 100% fail-proof, and based on that you can also add workflows and other collection-based automations to it, and you'll be rest assured that it will be tracked and renewed at the end of its life cycle. Okay, so let's take a look at this. So when a user comes to the, So when the user comes to enroll a certificate, right? So on the Keyfactor Command portal, when the user enters the PFX enrollment portal, there will be a unique identifier that they will have to supply. It can be anything, for example, the employee ID of the enrolling user. So it's just one bit of information that we are asking from them, rather than having them fill out the entire details, because it's going to be difficult for him to enter the complete information correctly, rather than just enter the employee ID. So once the user enters the employee ID, he can just simply enroll for the certificate. And once the certificate is enrolled, it is going to go into a certain collection. And once the certificate enters a collection, it is triggered. So we'll probably start the alert handlers on that particular certificate. So issued certificate handler will pick up that certificate, and based on the unique identifier which is supplied by the user, like for example his employee ID, it will query ServiceNow and it will ask what sort of assignment groups is this user a member of. So depending upon that, if it's just a single assignment group, it's going to bring the result back and it's going to update the metadata fields. But what if a user is a member of multiple assignment groups? Sorry. In that particular case, what will happen, it's going to handle multiple use cases. So that is something that we'll take a look at in the next stage. So, okay, now we saw the first straightforward approach. If a user is part of just a single assignment group, the metadata is pulled back and it's updated into the certificate and the workflow ends right there. But if a user is part of multiple assignment groups, in that case, we have to make sure the certificate is tied to the correct assignment group. And for that, after the certificate is issued, email is triggered to the requesting user asking that you are a part of, say for example, 2 assignment groups. So just pick one where this particular certificate that you've requested needs to be tied to. So based on the user's input, it's going to do a recheck, and based on the input provided, it's going to update the certificate's metadata. So this was just one quick example where we are adding the assignment group information in the metadata, but depending upon each customer's unique use cases, we can customize how many metadata fields that we need to pull in via the API and update it into Keyfactor command. Sorry. Okay, so next we're gonna do a technical deep dive into how exactly the service now is queried from Keyfactor command. So we're gonna make API calls to ServiceNow to capture the information that we need in our certificates metadata fields. And data mapping, so ServiceNow responds to Keyfactor command's metadata fields. So we have to make sure that the response that we are receiving from the ServiceNow API call that we've done, it is correctly inputted into the metadata field back in the certificate. Now, automated metadata updates. So this is when the user is part of just a single assignment group. So there's no input required from the user at all. So if it's just a single assignment group, it'll just update the metadata automatically, and it'll automatically place the certificate in the right collection that is created for that particular assignment group. There is absolutely no input required from the end user in this particular case. And last but not the least, the error handling and notification. So this is something that we just discussed. If the user is part of multiple assignment groups, in order to make sure the certificate is tied to the right group, we have to send out an email to the user, make sure that they are updating the metadata correctly, selecting the response correctly, and the certificate gets tagged to the right collection. Thank you. Okay, so the next one is the certificate validation. I'll hand it over to Zubin. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sushil. Certificate validation workflow. So this is a pretty interesting use case that we came across from a customer. Usually, when we talk about certificate validation, oftentimes what we've seen is, we would recommend that you integrate certificate stores, and then if you want to validate where a certificate resides, where it should be versus what the current locations are, we would usually recommend that you use something that Keyfactor has a built-in mechanism. So certificates entered a collection, or certificate left a collection. So if you have certificate stores already integrated, you could just quickly validate whether this certificate which resides in this particular certificate store, it was a part of this collection, it left this collection, or it entered this collection, and on the basis of that information you would be able to know if the certificate has reached its intended location, right? You issued a certificate, you checked if it entered a collection through a store, you verify that okay, this is where the certificate is supposed to be, it's all good. One customer particularly brought this unique challenge to us, that we have hundreds of thousands of certificate stores. We will not be able to kind of integrate all those hundreds of thousands of certificate stores. It's a very large overhead. What we could do is we could give you IP ranges where the certificates reside. Can you identify if a certificate that I renewed, is it where it's supposed to be? It was kind of an initial problem, right? Because we don't have a way to access or to compare where the certificate was previously located and where it's supposed to be. We kind of leveraged key factors, SSL discovery mechanism here to fulfill this particular requirement. Essentially what we did was we got access to the IP ranges where the certificates are initially placed. So that is, a certificate location. Once we know where a certificate resides, so let's say a certificate resides on a web server, we do an SSL discovery job on it, we get the initial locations. Once the certificate gets to a stage where it has to be renewed, the renewal also triggers another workflow, that is the validation workflow, where what we essentially do is we fetch the certificates that we fetch the older certificate from which the newer certificate was issued off of. We fetch the older certificate ID, get the SSL discovery job location, SSL discovery locations from the jobs that were previously initiated, and then execute the same job on the newer certificate, and then we compare the locations. So using this particular workflow, essentially we eliminated the need to have certificate stores in place. So let's say if you have a certificate that is residing on web server A right now, when it's renewed, we'll trigger an SSL discovery job and ensure that the newer certificate that you have also has the same location. So that way you're able to validate whether the certificate has reached its intended location or not. In a nutshell, how we essentially implement this workflow is we trigger an alert. It can be based off a metadata which can put a certificate into a certain collection, and then collection will trigger an alert handler. From the alert handler, we'll identify which certificate was just now pushed into it, what is the common name or any other unique property that the associated certificate has, do a search using the Keyfactor API. The Keyfactor API would return the list of certificates. Now we had to find a way to pick the latest certificate. So you might have a single web server certificate 5 times in Keyfactor command with the same common name. We had to find identify a way to figure out the latest certificate. That was done through some checks and a logic on the API. So we are able to find the latest certificate. Once we have the old and the newer certificate IDs both, we get the location data from the older certificate. We initiate a job on the newer certificate, the cert ID, and then we compare the locations. On the basis of this information, we can either trigger a metadata update that the certificate has been validated. You could probably choose to send alerts, notifications to end users, to groups that the certificate belongs to, that this certificate was issued, it has reached these particular locations, does this look okay? Yep, I think I've covered that particular bit. There is also a couple of spins to this particular workflow. So you could trigger these workflows when a certificate is nearing its expiration time. You could probably run other workflows in parallel with this. So you can basically automate the renewal part, and then you can also trigger the validation workflow on top of the renewal workflow. So once the certificates are renewed, let's say today, 5 days from now you trigger the validation workflow, so that way you know that the certificate has been renewed, and within n number of days it gives the users ample time to push the certificates down to its intended locations, and that way you have a validation mechanism in place as well. Of course, there are checks and logics implemented in this workflow, so we gracefully handle all exceptions and errors and cases where a certificate might not have reached its intended location, where we are not able to pull the existing SSL data. Those kinds of checks have been implemented into the workflow as well. So the PKI teams have good visibility in terms of how the workflow is operating as well. Okay. Here's a quick glimpse of how this workflow works in a nutshell. So certificates metadata changes, it triggers the certificate to be pushed down into a collection. Once it's pushed, initially we check if it's already been validated, whether we want to run the workflow against it or not. If it's already validated, then we skip it entirely. If it's not, then we enter the loop where we kind of trigger the whole workflow. We get the existing certificate ID from the request itself. We compare it to the older certificate. If the certificates ID match, there is only one certificate, we skip the workflow. If we get multiple certificate locations, then we start identifying which is the latest one. And then once we have identified the latest certificate, we kind of do SSL scanning on it from the certificate locations. And then the subsequent steps are called to validate the locations the certificate resides. Okay.
Yeah.
I think that is it. Quick glimpse of, sorry. Yeah, so benefits of automation, it gives you enhanced efficiency, you are ensuring compliance, and then you have more accuracy if workflows are automating the daily mundane tasks as well. We kind of have the workflow code published as well in a GitHub repository, and we'll be sharing a QR code towards the end of the slide where you could probably scan that code and get access to the workflow codes as well. And I think, sorry, that's it. Yeah, open to questions. Oh, it's on this one? Yeah. Yes, please.
How does Dotsquares integrate with key components of PKI, such as the RA, Registration Authority, or CA, or Validating Authority, to automate lifecycle management in ServiceNow? So how do you, can you give an example of that? How Dotsquares plays a role in that?
Yeah, sure. So if we're talking about specific certificate authorities or RAs, right? So we do have Keyfactor Command integrated, and these PKI components will be already synced into Keyfactor Command. So what we are doing, for example, EJBCA as a CA, or public CAs, or Microsoft ADCA. So these databases are already synced into Keyfactor Command. So it's kind of like a centralized repository of all of your certificates, whether it's an internal certificate issued from Microsoft, EJBCA, or public CA certificate. So everything is in one place. Now, when you have all the certificates in one single repository, you will be bifurcating them based on the collections. Special use cases, so collection for specific departments, or collection for specific use cases, or collections as per the unique requirements. And on that particular collection, you can either add a handler. So handler will take care of a lot of tasks that usually manually PKI admins have to go through. So coming back to the initial question, when we are doing an issuance of a certificate, we are doing it from Keyfactor Command, but the backend is a certificate authority. It can either be Microsoft, EJBCA, or a public CA. So the initial bit of issuing the certificate and tagging the metadata, that is something that is processed from Keyfactor Command's workflows, which are extremely powerful. And we only were able to showcase the two unique use cases that we felt each and every customer should have in place, so that the certificate inception and the renewal and validation, everything gets tracked. Hope that answers. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I guess you will be available in your
Yes, yes, yes. So,
yes.
yes.
Just at your booth?
Yeah, so we are at just the entrance towards the left-hand side. So you all can come and ask us any questions just in case if you have around this or anything else related to PKI. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.